The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. while I was reviewing blueprints for the Morrison project. Working late again? Don't wait up. R. I stared at my phone screen, the blue glow illuminating the stack of construction estimates scattered across my kitchen table. Rhea, my girlfriend of 3 years, had been working late a lot recently. As a lifestyle columnist for City Living magazine, she claimed timelines were crushing her. But lifestyle columns about artisanal coffee shops and boutique fitness studios didn't typically require midnight oil. My name is Grant Solen. I'm 39, a construction estimator for Hartwell & Associates, and I've spent the last 15 years learning to read between the lines, whether it's blueprints or people. Right now, both were telling me the same thing. Something was structurally unsound. I closed my laptop and walked to the window of our shared apartment. The city sprawled below, a maze of steel and glass that I'd helped estimate, measure, and build. Tomorrow I'd be back on the Morrison site, calculating materials for a 40-story luxury tower. Tonight, I was calculating the cost of my relationship. Rhea's laptop sat open on the counter, forgotten in her rush to leave for another emergency meeting. The screensaver showed photos of us from last Christmas, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light, my construction-weathered hands wrapped around her waist. We looked happy. We looked like we belonged together. I'd been telling myself that story for months. The apartment reflected Rhea's aesthetic: minimalist furniture, carefully curated art, everything positioned for maximum Instagram impact. My contributions were relegated to the spare bedroom I'd converted into a home office. 2 worlds sharing the same address but occupying different dimensions. My phone buzzed again. A notification from Instagram showed Rhea had posted a story 20 minutes ago, a photo of a martini glass against exposed brick, tagged at Meridian, the trendy bar downtown. The timestamp read 11:30 p.m. If she was working late, she was doing it with top-shelf gin? I screenshot the post and filed it away in my mental folder labeled Evidence. 3 days later, Rhea suggested we meet her friends at Skyline, the rooftop bar that had become her second office. "It'll be fun," she said, applying lipstick with surgical precision. "Kira's bringing her new boyfriend, and Evan will be there too." Evan Briggs. Rhea's editor at the magazine, 40 years old, drove a black Audi, and had the kind of calculated charm that worked on lifestyle columnists and Instagram influencers. He'd been appearing in Rhea's stories with increasing frequency, always in group shots, always positioned just close enough to suggest familiarity. "Sure," I said, straightening my button-down shirt. It was clean, but showed the wear of a man who worked with his hands for a living. "Sounds great." The sarcasm was lost on her. Skyline occupied the 23rd floor of a building I'd helped renovate 2 years earlier. I knew every beam and joint in that structure, every corner where corners had been cut to save money. The irony wasn't lost on me as we stepped off the elevator into the carefully designed atmosphere of exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Kira waved us over to a corner table with panoramic city views. She was Rhea's best friend and professional enabler, the kind of woman who treated gossip like currency and social media like a competitive sport. Her new boyfriend, a finance bro named Derek, was already drunk and loud. Evan stood as we approached, extending his hand with practiced politeness. "Grant, good to see you again, man." His grip was firm but soft, the handshake of someone who'd never held anything heavier than a laptop. "Likewise," I replied, settling into the chair that put my back to the wall. Old habits from construction sites, where situational awareness kept you from getting hurt. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Rhea animated and sparkling as she recounted her latest assignment about sustainable fashion. Kira documenting every moment for her Instagram story. Evan leaning in with editorial suggestions that sounded more like flirtation. I nursed my beer and watched the dynamics play out. Derek bragged about his cryptocurrency investments. Kira validated every word with enthusiastic nods. Rhea and Evan shared inside jokes about magazine politics that excluded everyone else at the table. "Grant's been working on that huge tower downtown," Rhea said during a lull in conversation. It was the first time she'd acknowledged my presence in 20 minutes. "Oh, the Morrison project?" Evan asked with polite interest. "That's impressive. How do you even estimate something that massive?" I started to explain the process, how you break down complex structures into manageable components, calculate materials and labor, account for variables and contingencies. It was work I was good at, work that mattered. "God, Grant," Rhea interrupted with a laugh that cut through my explanation like a blade. "Listen to yourself. You're putting everyone to sleep." The table fell silent for a beat. Derek looked uncomfortable. Kira studied her phone screen with sudden intensity. I began. He can't even plan a weekend, let alone build anything real, Rhea continued, rolling her eyes dramatically. The words hit like a physical blow. I mean, seriously. Last month I asked him to book us a romantic getaway, and he spent 3 hours researching hotel reviews like he was buying construction equipment. Laughter erupted around the table. Not good-natured ribbing between friends, but sharp, cutting laughter that drew looks from nearby tables. Kira giggled behind her hand. Derek guffawed like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Even Evan smiled, though he had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I sat there absorbing it all. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 3 years had just publicly humiliated me in front of her friends and the man I suspected she was cheating with. The laughter continued, feeding on itself, growing louder. I finished my beer in one long swallow, the bitter liquid matching my mood perfectly. Then I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and placed a 20 on the table, enough to cover my drinks and tip. "Grant, where are you going?" Rhea asked, her laughter fading as she realized I was leaving. I looked at her for a long moment, memorizing the scene, her flushed cheeks from too much wine, the way Evan's hand rested casually on the back of her chair, the expectant faces of her friends waiting for my reaction. "Home," I said simply. I walked away without another word, leaving behind the sound of resumed conversation and nervous laughter. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a different world, one where I had clarity about what needed to be done. My phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Rhea's name lit up the screen, accompanied by the photo I'd taken of her last summer at the beach, sun-kissed and smiling, looking like someone who could never hurt anyone. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 2:19, then 2:23, then 2:31. Each time, I watched the phone buzz against my nightstand and did nothing. By the fourth call, I turned it face down and tried to sleep. The voicemails came in a progression that told its own story. The first was defensive. "Grant, you're being ridiculous. It was just a joke. Call me back." The second showed cracks. "Look, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but you're overreacting. We need to talk." By the third, desperation had crept in. "Please just call me back. I'm worried about you." I deleted them all without listening to the end. The next morning, I drove to the Morrison site and threw myself into work. There's something therapeutic about construction, the precision required, the way complex problems break down into manageable solutions. I spent 4 hours reviewing structural specifications and calculating load-bearing requirements for the tower's upper floors. "You look like hell," said Frankie DeLuca, my work partner and the closest thing I had to a best friend. He was 52, divorced twice, and possessed the kind of street wisdom that comes from 3 decades in construction. "What happened? Rhea finally figure out you're too good for her?" I handed him the steel beam calculations I'd been working on. "Something like that." Frankie studied the numbers, then studied my face. "You want to talk about it, or should I just assume she screwed you over and move on to the part where I tell you she wasn't worth it anyway?" "The second one. Good choice. She wasn't worth it anyway." He clapped me on the shoulder. "But for what it's worth, I heard some interesting gossip from the guys who worked the Meridian renovation last month." Meridian. The bar from Rhea's Instagram story. "Yeah? They said there's this blonde writer type who comes in regular-like with some slick magazine guy. Always the same table, always very cozy. Figured it might be relevant to your interests." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something clicked into place like a beam settling into its foundation. "Thanks for the heads up." That evening, I did what I do best. I analyzed the situation methodically. Rhea's laptop was still on the counter where she'd left it, password protected but not encrypted. 3 years of living together meant I knew her passwords, variations of her birthday, her cat's name from childhood, her mother's maiden name. The third attempt got me in. Her email told the story I'd already suspected. Dinner reservations for 2 at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel confirmations for weekend trips I'd never taken. Most damning was a thread between Rhea, Kira, and someone named E. Briggs, editor, that went back 6 months. The messages were a masterclass in casual cruelty. Rhea complaining about my blue-collar limitations. Kira encouraging her to upgrade to someone more sophisticated. Evan positioning himself as the obvious solution to her relationship problems. One exchange from 2 weeks earlier made me physically sick. Rhea. "Grant wants to take me camping this weekend. Camping, like I'm going to sleep on the ground and pee in the woods." Kira. "You. Why are you still with him again?" Rhea. "Convenience, mostly. He pays half the rent and doesn't ask questions when I work late, but it's getting harder to pretend we're compatible." Evan. "You deserve someone who appreciates your sophistication, someone who can match your ambition." Rhea. "Someone like you?" Evan. I didn't say that. But yes. I screenshot everything and saved it to a secure folder. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, processing what I'd learned. The woman I'd been planning a future with saw me as a convenience, a placeholder, someone who paid bills while she figured out her real life. The humiliation at Skyline wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was her true feelings finally surfacing in public. My phone buzzed with a text from Rhea. "Can we please talk? I feel terrible about last night." I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Angry ones, hurt ones, sarcastic ones that would have made her feel as small as she'd made me feel. In the end, I sent nothing. Silence, I was learning, was its own kind of power. The next morning, I called my landlord. Our lease was up for renewal in 30 days, and both our names were on it. But the security deposit had come from my savings account, and I'd been the one to pass the credit check when we'd applied. "I need to discuss some changes to the lease renewal," I told him. Then I called the credit card companies. The joint account we'd opened for shared expenses was technically in my name, with Rhea as an authorized user. I explained that I needed to remove the authorized user and change the account parameters. "Can I ask the reason for the change?" the customer service representative asked. "Relationship ended," I said simply. Next was the magazine. Rhea's column was sponsored by a local home improvement store, a connection I'd helped her make through my industry contacts. The store owner, Mike Patterson, had been happy to support local journalism, especially when it came with a recommendation from someone he trusted. "Mike, it's Grant Solen. I need to discuss the sponsorship arrangement for the City Living column." "Sure, Grant. Everything okay? Rhea's pieces have been great for business." "I'm glad to hear that. But I need to withdraw my recommendation. Personal reasons. I think it's best if the magazine finds alternative sponsorship." There was a pause. "I see. Well, if that's what you think is best. You've always been straight with me, so I'll respect your judgment." The conversation was over in 5 minutes. By the end of the week, the magazine would be scrambling to replace the lost revenue. I spent the rest of the day at work, focusing on the Morrison project with laser intensity. The tower was taking shape floor by floor, exactly as we'd planned it. There was satisfaction in watching something grow from blueprints into reality, in seeing your calculations proven correct by tons of steel and concrete. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from Rhea. I ignored them all. At lunch, Frankie joined me on the scaffolding overlooking the construction site. "You're handling this better than I expected," he said, unwrapping a sandwich. "Most guys would be drunk or picking fights by now." "Most guys don't know how to plan properly," I replied. He studied my profile. "You're planning something, aren't you?" I took a bite of my sandwich and watched a crane lift steel beams into position 40 stories above the street. "I'm always planning something, Frankie. It's what I do." That evening, I came home to find Rhea waiting in the hallway outside our apartment. She'd been crying, her makeup was smudged, and her usually perfect hair looked disheveled. "Grant, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day." I unlocked the door without acknowledging her presence and walked inside. She followed, talking rapidly. "Look, I know you're upset about the other night, and you have every right to be. I was drunk, and I said things I didn't mean. It was stupid and cruel, and I'm sorry." I set my keys on the counter and turned to face her. She looked smaller somehow, less polished than usual. Vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "Are you sleeping with Evan?" I asked. The question hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. "Grant, Yes or no, Rhea? Are you sleeping with Evan Briggs?" She sank into one of her carefully chosen chairs, the fight going out of her all at once. "It's not what you think." "So that's a yes." Tears started flowing again, but they felt performative now, calculated to generate sympathy and forgiveness. "It just happened. We were working late, and there was this connection, and—" "How long?" "Grant, please. How long, Rhea?" "3 months." The words came out as a whisper. I nodded, filing away the information. 3 months of lies. 3 months of working late and emergency meetings. 3 months of sharing my bed with someone who was sharing herself with another man. "I want you out," I said calmly. "What?" "Out of the apartment, tonight." "Grant, you can't be serious. We can work through this. People make mistakes. The lease renewal is in my name only. I've already spoken to the landlord. You have no legal right to be here." Her tears stopped as the implications hit her. "You can't just kick me out. This is my home, too." "No," I said, walking to the closet and pulling out a suitcase. "This is my home. You're just someone who's been staying here." I began packing her clothes methodically, folding each item with the same precision I used for blueprint measurements. She watched in stunned silence as 3 years of shared living got reduced to luggage. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked finally. I handed her the packed suitcase. "I'm sure Evan has ideas." She took the bag with trembling hands, looking around the apartment like she was seeing it for the last time. "Grant, please, can't we at least talk about this?" I opened the door and waited. After a long moment, she walked through it. "This isn't over," she said from the hallway. I closed the door and turned the lock bolt. Then I walked to the window and watched her emerge from the building onto the street below, suitcase in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling Evan. For the first time in months, the apartment felt like home. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of purposeful activity. I threw myself into work with renewed focus, arriving early and staying late to review calculations and specifications. The Morrison project was ahead of schedule, and my estimates were proving accurate within margins that impressed even the veteran contractors. "You're like a machine lately," Frankie observed as we reviewed the latest delivery schedules. "Either you're handling this breakup better than anyone in history, or you're planning something that's going to get you arrested." "Option 3, I said, marking off completed items on my checklist. "I'm just getting my life back on track." But Frankie wasn't wrong about the planning. Every evening, I returned to my apartment now, without Rhea's aesthetic impositions, and worked on what I'd started thinking of as project accountability. The screenshots from Rhea's laptop were just the beginning. I'd spent hours documenting the timeline of her affair, cross-referencing her social media posts with credit card statements and text message timestamps. The pattern was clear and damning. 3 months of systematic deception, funded partly by my income and enabled by my trust. More importantly, I'd started reaching out to my network. 15 years in construction had taught me that information was currency, and I'd accumulated considerable wealth in that regard. The guy who'd renovated Meridian owed me a favor from when I'd helped him navigate a permit dispute. The woman who managed social media for 3 downtown restaurants remembered when I'd recommended her for the job. The bartender at Skyline had worked construction before switching careers and still considered himself part of the brotherhood. People talk to construction workers. We're invisible in plain sight, trusted with access to private spaces and conversations. We hear things. What I heard about Rhea and Evan painted a picture of 2 people who thought they were smarter than everyone around them. They had their regular table at Meridian every Tuesday. They'd been seen leaving the Grandview Hotel together on multiple occasions. Evan had been bragging to other magazine staff about his relationship upgrade. Most interesting was what I learned about Evan's professional situation. City Living was struggling financially, like most print publications. The home improvement store sponsorship that I'd helped arrange wasn't just supporting Rhea's column, it was keeping the magazine afloat. Without that revenue stream, they'd be looking at layoffs within the month. I was reviewing these notes when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Grant, it's Kira. We need to talk." Rhea's best friend and enabler. The woman who'd encouraged her to upgrade and had laughed the loudest at Skyline. "Do we?" I asked. "Look, I know you're angry, but you're being ridiculous. Rhea is staying on my couch, crying every night. She made a mistake, but people make mistakes. You're destroying her life over one bad decision." I let her talk, taking notes on her tone and arguments. Desperation masked as righteous indignation. Classic enabler behavior. "One bad decision?" I repeated when she finished. "Kira, she was cheating for 3 months. That's not one decision. That's 90 days of decisions. 90 days of choosing to lie to my face and mock me behind my back." "She never mocked you." "I have the screenshots, Kira. Every conversation, every cruel joke, every time you encouraged her to treat me like garbage." Silence on the other end of the line. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "Nothing from you. But if Rhea wants to have a conversation, she can call me herself. Stop being her messenger." I hung up and added the call to my documentation. Kira's involvement suggested Rhea was getting desperate. Good. The call I'd been expecting came the next evening. Rhea's number, but a different tone when I answered. "Grant, please don't hang up." She sounded exhausted, defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd humiliated me at Skyline. "I'm listening." "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you get me fired?" The magazine had terminated her column that morning. Budget cuts, they'd said. Loss of sponsorship revenue. I'd heard about it through my network before she did. "No," I said, which was technically true. I hadn't gotten her fired. I'd simply withdrawn my support for her sponsorship. The magazine had made their own decision about how to handle the revenue loss. "But you pulled the sponsorship." "I ended my business relationship with the magazine. That's different from getting you fired." "Grant, that sponsorship was keeping my column alive. You knew that." And you knew that cheating on me might have consequences. We both made informed decisions. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, processing the implications. What do you want from me? She asked finally. What will it take for you to stop punishing me? I'm not punishing you, Rhea. I'm just not helping you anymore. There's a difference. This isn't you. You're not vindictive. You're not cruel. You're right. I'm not cruel. If I were cruel, I would have posted those screenshots of your group chat on social media. I would have sent them to your mother or to Evan's wife. Another silence. Longer this time. Evan's not married, she said weakly. Evan's separated. His wife moved out 6 months ago, but they're not divorced yet. She might be very interested to know why her husband has been working so many late nights. It was a bluff. I didn't know anything about Evan's marital status. But Rhea's sharp intake of breath told me I'd guessed correctly. You wouldn't? I don't want to. But if you keep sending Kira to harass me, or if you try to make this my fault somehow, I might change my mind about keeping your secrets. The conversation ended there. Rhea hung up without another word. I felt no satisfaction in her defeat, no joy in her desperation, just the quiet certainty that comes from seeing a plan execute exactly as designed. 3 days later, Frankie brought news from the construction site Gossip Network. You hear about that lifestyle magazine downtown, City Living? I looked up from my calculations. What about it? Word is they're shutting down, lost their major sponsor, and couldn't make the numbers work. Bunch of people getting laid off, including some editor who was bragging about his new girlfriend last month. I nodded and returned to my work. That's too bad. A lot of good people probably worked there. Yeah, Frankie said, but he was studying my face with the expression of someone trying to solve a complex engineering problem. Funny thing is, I heard the sponsor they lost was connected to someone in construction. Small world, right? Very small, I agreed. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. I deleted it without responding and made myself dinner in my quiet, peaceful apartment. Outside the windows, the city sparkled with lights from buildings I'd helped create. Tomorrow I'd be back on the Morrison site, watching another floor take shape according to my calculations. Some structures you build, others you let collapse under their own weight. Both required careful planning. 2 months after the breakup, I was having the best professional year of my career. The Morrison project had come in under budget and ahead of schedule, earning praise from the contractors and a bonus that I used to upgrade my apartment. I'd removed all traces of Rhea's aesthetic choices and replaced them with furniture that actually suited my tastes. Solid wood, built to last, chosen for comfort rather than Instagram appeal. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Work, gym, occasional drinks with Frankie and the crew. I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee meetings with women who seemed interested in conversation rather than lifestyle photography. Then Kira showed up at the Morrison site. I was reviewing foundation specifications when security called to say I had a visitor. She stood in the construction trailer wearing designer jeans and an expression of barely contained fury. We need to talk, she announced. No, we don't. I returned to my blueprints. This is a construction site. You need a hard hat and safety certification to be here. Rhea's in the hospital. That got my attention. I looked up to find Kira's eyes red-rimmed and accusatory. What happened? Panic attacks. Severe depression. She's been barely eating for weeks. The doctor says it's a complete nervous breakdown. Kira's voice cracked. She can't function, Grant. She can't work, can't sleep, can't stop crying. You did this to her. I set down my pencil and studied Kira's face. The desperation was real, but so was the manipulation. Classic enabler playbook. Make the victim responsible for the consequences of their actions. I'm sorry she's struggling, I said carefully. But I didn't put her in the hospital. Her choices did. Your choices put her there. You systematically destroyed her career, her reputation, her ability to support herself. Over what? A mistake? A 3-month affair isn't a mistake, Kira. It's a pattern of deliberate deception. So you decided to ruin her life. I stood up, my patience finally exhausted. I decided to stop enabling her life. There's a difference. She loved you. She loved what I provided. Stability, financial support, someone to pay half the bills while she figured out her real feelings. That's not love. That's convenience. Kira's composure cracked entirely. You're a bastard. You know that? A cold, calculating bastard. Maybe, but I'm not a cheater. She left without another word, but her visit had accomplished something I hadn't expected. It forced me to examine my own motivations. Was I seeking justice or revenge? Was there a difference? That evening, I called Mike Patterson at the home improvement store. Mike, it's Grant. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the magazine sponsorship. Oh, hey Grant. Yeah, that was unfortunate. I heard the whole publication went under. A lot of people lost their jobs. I heard that too. Listen, I know you were happy with the exposure the column provided. Would you be interested in sponsoring a different publication? Maybe something with broader reach? Sure, if you've got recommendations, you've always steered me right. I gave him the contact information for 3 local publications that would be thrilled to have his advertising dollars. Good publications with ethical staff who deserved the support. It wasn't about Rhea anymore. It was about making sure the collateral damage didn't extend to people who hadn't betrayed anyone's trust. The next morning brought unexpected news. Frankie arrived at the site with gossip that changed everything. You're not going to believe this, he said, pulling me aside. Remember that magazine editor? The one who was bragging about his new girlfriend. Evan Briggs? That's the one. Turns out he's been running some kind of side business, using his position at the magazine to get access to restaurant openings, hotel launches, fancy events. Then he'd write fake reviews and demand payment to publish positive coverage. I stopped working and gave Frankie my full attention. That's extortion. Gets better. He was using his girlfriend, your ex, to help with the scam. She'd attend events, gather information, help him identify targets. Real professional operation. The implications hit me like a load of falling steel. Rhea hadn't just been cheating, she'd been participating in a criminal enterprise. All those work events and emergency meetings weren't just cover for an affair. They were actual work. Illegal work. How do you know all this? My cousin works security at the Grandview Hotel. They've been investigating missing inventory and suspicious activity for months. Turns out your ex and her boyfriend were using comp rooms to run their operation. Hotel finally got enough evidence to call the police. I felt sick. 3 years with someone, and I'd never suspected she was capable of criminal activity. The betrayal went deeper than infidelity. It was a complete misunderstanding of who she actually was. Are they pressing charges? Already did. Both of them got arrested yesterday. It's going to be in the papers tomorrow. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, mechanically reviewing specifications while processing this new information. Rhea wasn't in the hospital because of depression. She was there because she'd been arrested. Kira's visit had been one last manipulation, trying to make me feel guilty for something I hadn't even known about. That evening, I called my lawyer. Jim, it's Grant Solen. I need some advice about potential criminal exposure. I explained the situation, my relationship with Rhea, the timeline of our breakup, my knowledge of her activities. Did you ever attend these events with her? Jim asked. A few times early in our relationship, but I never knew about any extortion scheme. Did you provide financial support that might have enabled the criminal activity? I paid half the rent and shared expenses, but I never gave her money directly for her work. Then you're probably fine. If questioned, be completely honest about what you knew and when. The timeline of your breakup actually works in your favor. It establishes that you discovered the affair and ended the relationship before learning about the criminal activity. I hung up feeling relieved, but also strangely empty. The woman I'd been planning a future with was a criminal. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a complete fiction of identity. My phone rang an hour later. Rhea's number. Grant, thank God you answered. I need your help. Her voice was different, smaller, desperate, stripped of all pretense. I can't help you, Rhea. Please, just listen. I know how this looks, but it wasn't my idea. Evan convinced me it was just networking, just using connections to help businesses get exposure. I didn't know he was demanding payments. That's not what the police think. Silence. Then, I know you were arrested. I know about the extortion scheme. I know you've been lying to me about a lot more than just the affair. Grant, I swear I didn't understand what we were doing was illegal. Evan said it was just aggressive marketing. Even if that's true, and I don't believe it is, you still chose to lie to me for months. You still chose to cheat. You still chose to humiliate me in public. I made mistakes. Hey, you made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, the story was front-page news in the local business section. Magazine editor and columnist arrested in extortion scheme. The article detailed the investigation, the evidence, the businesses that had been targeted. Rhea's photo ran alongside Evan's, both of them looking stunned and guilty in their booking shots. Frankie found me reading the article during lunch break. So, he said, settling beside me on the scaffolding, how does it feel to discover you were dating a criminal? I folded the newspaper and looked out over the city. The Morrison Tower was nearly complete, its steel skeleton now enclosed in glass and concrete. In 6 months, people would be living and working in spaces that existed because of calculations I'd made, materials I'd specified, problems I'd solved. It feels like I dodged a bullet, I said finally. More than one bullet. If you'd stayed with her, you might have gotten caught up in the investigation. Maybe. Or maybe I would have figured out what she was doing and stopped it. Frankie shook his head. Don't do that to yourself. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He was right, but it took me weeks to fully accept it. I'd spent months thinking I was dealing with infidelity and betrayal. The reality was much worse. I'd been in love with someone who didn't exist. The Rhea I'd known was a carefully constructed fiction, designed to hide activities that could have destroyed both our lives. 3 months later, the legal proceedings concluded. Evan received 18 months in federal prison. Rhea, as a first-time offender who cooperated with investigators, got 6 months and community service. I never spoke to her again. The Morrison Tower opened on schedule, a gleaming addition to the city skyline. I attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony and felt the satisfaction that comes from seeing a plan executed perfectly. Every beam was where I'd calculated it should be, every load was distributed exactly as designed, every safety margin held exactly as specified. Building something real requires precision, patience, and the ability to learn from structural failures. My relationship with Rhea had been built on faulty foundations, trust misplaced, assumptions unchecked, warning signs ignored. I wouldn't make those mistakes again. Standing on the observation deck of the completed tower, looking out over the city I'd helped build, I realized that sometimes the best construction project is the one you walk away from before it collapses and takes you with it. Some blueprints are worth following, others are better left on the drafting table.